What's up everyone, it's Dakota. Now I have been a huge Spider-Man fan all of my life. I've always thought that he and Batman had the best and most diverse roster of villains out of all superheroes. Batman himself has had some fantastic video game adaptations through the Arkham series, but this time it's Spidey's turn. So let's dive right into Spider-Man Remastered on PC. This was my first time playing this game as I've never owned a PS4, so I went into this playthrough pretty much blind. As a heads up, this review does contain minor spoilers and talks about some of the specific characters and villains who show up. First up, let's talk about the state of the world. We're entering the life of a Spider-Man who is in his prime years. There's no laid out origin story for Peter this time around, but we're rather jumping into the boots of someone who has already taken down a few supervillains. This is a nice change as we already have several versions of Peter's origin story in mainstream Spider-Man media. In this specific universe, Peter is broken up with MJ, doesn't work for the Daily Bugle anymore, and is partnering with Dr. Otto Octavius for a special research project. At the same time, Spider-Man is trying to clean up the damage left in New York City by Kingpin. More fantastic adaptations of villains then show up throughout the game to fill the power vacuum left by the events of the prologue. I brought up the mainstream media versions of Spider-Man earlier because they're restricted in ways that Spider-Man Remastered isn't. The longest Spider-Man film is currently Across the Spider-Verse at 2 hours and 20 minutes, while Spider-Man Remastered has an average story completion time of about 17 to 20-ish hours. There's a huge difference here with the amount of storytelling you can do with the game version. It's not restricted to a movie's length, giving it time to craft a longer, more complicated and layered story that spans across 3 chapters and contains a plethora of characters and villains. Here's a brief breakdown of just how layered this story gets. There's the main story with villains spread across all 3 acts and Spider-Man's involvement with Captain Yuri and the police. Then you have Peter's relationship with Mary Jane as she appears throughout the game, along with Aunt May and Martin Lee at the homeless shelter called Feast. A couple of other roles include Peter starting to mentor Miles Morales and J. Jonah Jameson criticizing everything on his talk show. Peter's real job involves helping Dr. Octavius with a special project. Then you've got all the various side villains that show up like Shocker, Tombstone, Rhino, and Screwball, unfortunately. Mayor Norman Osborn is pulling a lot of the strings in the background, part of which causes Silver Sable to show up in the later acts. There's a lot going on, but the story is surprisingly well balanced. I was immersed within the world the entire time, and I felt it flowed naturally through each chapter. There are seeds planted everywhere of what's to come next, and it's brilliant how everything comes together in the later stages of the game. The story is not all sunshine and rainbows, with a few heartbreaking moments that really change the vibes of each act. It really gets emotional at a few points. The first act is more positive that ends tragically, then Act 2 raises the stakes with Silver Sable and more demon attacks. I can only describe Act 3 as complete and utter chaos as the whole city becomes a war zone. It really makes you think about what the Avengers were up to during this mess. Without spoilers, the finale of the story quite simply shows what makes Spider-Man, Spider-Man, excellently showcasing his perseverance, morality, and willingness to sacrifice. Even with all the chaos of the main story, the game still gives you an opportunity to be the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man that you've always wanted to be.
I think that debris is trapping someone inside that car. Almost got it!
There's 5 crime missions per city district that you can do, which adds up to a lot when you look at it as a whole, but in reality, it really only took about 2 to 3 hours to finish them all for me. However, they can get a little repetitive, and they do reset for each act whenever a new crime faction shows up.
Calling all units. We have an active robbery attempt on an armored vehicle. Nearest officer, proceed to Robinson.
D, park the hard times. Were you not loved enough as demon babies? Dad too withholding? Mom not around? Let you cry all night?
The side quests also tell some good but smaller scale stories. There's a touching mission with a man named Howard who lost his pigeons, a great multi-quest story involving Tombstone, and even a small adventure around the city to track down Black Cat. There are also all kinds of activities spread around the city that add small details to Peter's life and the overall story. Though there were tons of collectibles hidden all around town, it felt like they really added value to the game rather than being a hassle to find. I loved all the audio lines and backstory that came with finding Peter's backpacks.
Rhino almost killed me until I broke this chip off his horn and figured out what his costume's made of.
I also thought that traveling around and taking pictures of landmarks was a fun activity because there's a lot to see in New York, both real and Marvel Universe based. I spent a lot of time appreciating the sights and the sounds of the city, and it was nice to find a high spot and just gaze over all the buildings and ships in the distance. The city is also beautiful to explore in both the day and night, which helps too. It's the small details that really help the world to feel more alive, like the murals that fit within the game's universe. J. Jonah Jameson has his own Joe Rogan-style podcast/talk show, and it's just hilarious to hear, and they really don't hold back with how many of these clips they recorded, which I think is incredible.
Be vigilant, be on guard, and keep a close eye on that barista with the man bun making your skinny latte, or you could be next!
He's always been one of my favorite parts about Spider-Man. Going back to side objectives, Harry's challenges specifically had more overdone storytelling compared to the rest of the game. Don't get me wrong, the gameplay side of these objectives offer up some interesting challenges. However, every single research station seemed to have an overly dire situation that needed to be solved immediately. For me, this diminished the immersion, and I was honestly getting tired of Pete saying things like,
I better take care of it before the food supply's contaminated.
Other than that, these missions were fun to complete from a gameplay perspective.
The downside is, I don't think these barrels appreciate my quips.
Before ever touching this game, I did see some complaints about how the missions where you're controlling some of the normal characters were boring and unneeded. I didn't think the Mary Jane missions, nor the Miles Morales missions were that bad. They offered a nice break between beating up criminals while also offering some insight into the minds of people besides Peter. Sure, MJ and Miles totally would have been caught by the people they were evading, but this is just when you have to let a video game be a video game.
That guy's not going anywhere.
What the hell was that?
I already brought up the Arkham series during my intro, and there was a good reason for that. Spider-Man Remastered's combat brought back plenty of fond memories from those games. There's a lot of shared love here. Spider-Man takes similar systems but expands upon them with Spidey's unique abilities. It's faster paced and you spend a significant amount of time airborne. It's a ton of fun swinging all over the place and racking up combos. It makes you feel powerful. Spidey brings his own gadgets to the table as well, most of which are web-based. They provide a variety of options for dealing with an increasing number of enemies as you progress through the game. Early on, combat relies mostly on your hand-to-hand physical attacks. Here's some of my early combat footage in which I was only fighting basic enemy types, with the occasional rocket guy or brute. I didn't have many gadgets or suit powers to choose from at the time. Flash forward to late game battles and the fights become more crowded, with a large variety of enemy types involved. It's evolved more towards using your gadgets to take out as many enemies as possible to refill your focus bar for finishers. You've also got to stay aware of your surroundings as certain enemy types have powerful counters to your actions, such as the whip guy who can slam you down out of the air. The only small complaint I have is about the gadgets. Basically, all of them are really fun to use, but switching between them does pause combat temporarily, so it can feel a little disjointed at times. That said, combat is hella fun and satisfying when everything comes together. Binding gadgets and taking out swaths of enemies really makes Spider-Man feel like the powerful hero he is. The developers also went ham with how many suits are available to use. Some have a really cool and natural feeling, while others are over the top and funny. We even got a special treat when they added the suits from all the Spider-Man movies, so you can save the day as Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, and Tom Holland's Spider-Man. Let me tell you, swinging around the city as Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man just hits different. I personally stuck with the main Spider-Man suit for the game because that's the suit I wanted to view this particular story with. However, it was always fun to switch suits every once in a while. Additionally, many of the suits aren't just for cosmetics. The first section of them, unlocked throughout the game, actually have individual powers that can give you the upper hand against tougher enemies. There's a lot of different ones to try, and they can get pretty wacky too.
You asked for this.
The developers put a significant amount of work into this part of the game, and I believe it pays off wonderfully. Web swinging is a unique mechanic that really feels like a skill that develops as you play. When I first started, I didn't quite grasp that I needed to intentionally look for where the buildings were so that I could have something to swing on. It took me a half second to realize, duh, you can't swing if nothing's there. Past that minor self-inflicted inconvenience, web swinging was a real joy to experience, and it was awesome to see myself improve and get faster at traversing the city as more skills were unlocked. City streets are stocked full of civilians and vehicles. Their AI isn't super advanced, but it gets the job done when you're swinging around. Traffic has a natural flow to it, and the whole system works well, especially when you're either higher up on a skyscraper or busy doing a mission/objective. It's not hard to see how simple the human AI is. You can kind of walk around and people will give comments, and you can give them high fives, nothing too fancy. Other than that, they're just there for the background effect, and it works really well most of the time. Though I did have one instance where they decided to stand right in the middle of my ongoing battle. I wasn't really sure what their plan was. In another example, a garbage truck driver allegedly kidnapped and murdered a thug. There I was, swinging around, fighting crime, webbing people up, the usual, when I webbed an unlucky criminal to the front of a garbage truck that had an impatient driver. As they honked at me to get out of the road, I pondered what would happen to the unfortunate soul attached to the front of the vehicle. Alas, when I finally removed myself from their path, the driver continued like normal. I allowed them some space, just a block or two, before I caught back up with them. To my shock, the webbed-up criminal had vanished without a trace. Where did this damn soul go, you might wonder? Perhaps he slipped off, and the garbage truck driver felt a slight bump in the road before carrying on with their day. Now obviously, the criminal despawned after the truck got a certain distance away from me, but my headcanon will remain the same. The garbage truck driver was a murderer, and with the type of person that was stuck to their hood, who could blame them for taking out the trash? Before I wrap up talking about the main game, I do want to mention a couple of glitches I experienced during combat finishers. Spider-Man has an attack where he spins around the enemy's head and he throws them with his legs. During this animation, my camera angle went into the side of a building and the whole world started insanely spinning. This happened twice and was definitely unexpected based on how the rest of the game had been handling up to those points. Another small issue was some occasional frame drops. This only really happened when exploring the denser parts of the open world. It wasn't extremely noticeable either. I usually hovered around 55 to 60 frames a second, with the drops bringing it down to about 40 to 45. Overall, I had a blast with Marvel's Spider-Man Remastered. A multi-layered story supported by great characters and exceptional gameplay helped this title to exceed all of my expectations. I could not recommend this game enough. It's one of my favorites from the past few years. I'm going to give the base game of Spider-Man Remastered a 9.5 out of 10. Moving on to the expansions, the City That Never Sleeps series begins with the Heist, a story largely focusing on Black Cat. She's a character who often teeters between friend and foe, and one whom we were given a tease of in the main campaign. As Amagia steps up to take control of the criminal underworld, Black Cat finds herself in the midst of all the gang unrest and violence. The story also continues where we left off with Peter and MJ's rekindled relationship. The pair of lovers are now working together more efficiently to fight crime, with MJ feeding out swaths of information to Spider-Man between missions whenever possible. We even get to learn more about their backstories and breakup period too, which adds some spiciness to their dialogue revolving around past lovers. The expansion also introduces us to NYPD Detective Mackey, who is searching for paintings that were stolen years prior. It's through this detective that the mystery behind Black Cat's past begins to unravel, and we learn a ton of backstory from him that helps add more depth to her character. The new collectibles are fun to find too. They're hidden inside of objects throughout the city, and you have to use Spider-Man's tools to find them. Detective Mackey enlists Spider-Man's help in this task, with more of his dialogue being unlocked as you find more paintings.
I appreciate your help. I'm retiring soon, and this case is my biggest loose end.
I quite enjoyed this storyline, how it stayed relevant to the current events of the game, and how the mission titles hinted at what was happening behind the scenes. Of course, Spider-Man swinging around town and breaking small pieces of New York's infrastructure is going to draw the attention of everyone's favorite talk show host, J. Jonah Jameson. He's back and has plenty to say about the Magia's rise to power, Spider-Man's alleged role in everything, and whatever else comes to his mind.
Wait, Jared tells me black leopards do have spots. You just can't see them? I was right after all! Ha!
He's just as hilarious as usual and is always a treat when he pops up. Screwball also made her return to the fold in this DLC. Her challenges were harder this time around in a good way and felt rewarding to finish off. However, the entire concept of Screwball's character feels like an on-the-nose Gen Z villain and is wildly cringy, especially in comparison to everything else Spider-Man is dealing with. Her main goal is to get more likes and followers by exploiting Spider-Man for views. She somehow has the resources to set up elaborate challenges and schemes that Spider-Man must deal with, all while she's live streaming everything.
Nice one! EMP down. Gotta stay on the trail.
The challenges are satisfying enough, but the character behind them is kinda disappointing. There's a couple of new side objectives and crime missions to do. including 2 where you had to disable bombs that the Maggia had planted. The first version involves playing one of the mini-games from the main campaign to deactivate the bomb, while the second revolves around using Spider-Bot. It was nice to see more action with Spider-Bot, though a completely unnecessary wish of mine is for the ability to just jump. I found myself constantly pressing the jump button for no good reason other than I wanted to fly around as Spider-Bot. Moving past the new objectives, there are plenty of the same ones from the main campaign as well. The reused missions include the classic stop the car chase and beat up the guys on the rooftop. While these aren't the worst missions to complete, the set pieces do tend to get repetitive.
Tip for the future. Don't misspell Federal Reserve next time you forge bills.
There's also a new enemy type introduced in this DLC, a brute wielding a minigun. He's incredibly tough to beat down, and can be a deadly adversary if his firepower isn't avoided. I found the easiest route to success against him was to use suit powers to quickly deplete his health while also staggering him. Even then, the new enemy was a pain at times, especially when you were fighting larger groups. The Heist offers a satisfying first entry into this storyline. Expanding on Black Cat's character was by far the best part, especially when you can see the ripples of her past affecting current situations with Spider-Man and even MJ. Hammerhead, a Maggia leader, proves to be a ruthless adversary who is willing to do whatever it takes to gain power. His introduction, supported by this expansion's fun side missions and collectibles, makes the Heist a solid piece of extra content for Marvel's Spider-Man Remastered. Turf Wars, the second DLC in the City That Never Sleeps series, continues the story with the Maggia bosses entering a full-on war. Yuri is the central allied character this time, and she is put through some tough situations. The story starts off darker than before, which effectively sets the tone for the ongoing gang war. Hammerhead continues to be the main antagonist and is looking for ways to become more powerful. The whole expansion has a grim tone to it. The vibe while exploring is darker and ominous. The city is pretty much raining the entire time and nothing seems to go Spider-Man's way, pushing Yuri toward her breaking point. I wasn't the biggest fan of the direction her story went in, but I completely understand her motivations. Her arc just felt rushed in the end, given there aren't as many missions to help push the runtime of this DLC. Weirdly enough, there aren't a lot of MJ interactions in this one. I found it strange because it seemed like the perfect opportunity to further develop the bond between her and Peter, especially with how the first DLC ended. They were also working together well, and it seemed like MJ was going to continue to be Spider-Man's woman in the chair, but she instead took a backseat during this expansion for some reason. Turf Wars also added a new enemy type that I found extremely annoying, the shield guys. They somehow always manage to hit you from behind, or from wherever they are to be honest, because they can fly too, and if you don't dodge their attacks, good luck. You won't be able to use your web abilities for a little bit after that.
What the crap?
I found their concept and implementation to be frustrating at best, but at least they can be taken down with only one bar of focus for finisher moves. Just like the base game and previous DLC, there are more crime missions to complete around the city. This time there are not nearly as many to do, and only a handful of city sections have them, which makes them less tedious to complete at least. You get the same old car chase sequences as before, backed up by a Maggia ambush as well.
Yeah.
Now I love clearing out a packed enemy base, and the Hammerhead strongholds managed to scratch that itch. They were a little bit tougher than the gang bases from the main game, but they weren't too difficult to get through overall. I initially thought they were going to be a nightmare after I unknowingly started with the hardest one, which sent several shield guys and Gatling gun guys at you at the same time. Luckily the rest of them were completely doable and fun. Yet another frustrating aspect of this DLC was Screwball. Her challenges were just aggravating this time around, like the ones that make you take out all the enemies without alerting anyone.
Down, many more to go. Ugh, persistent little bugger, aren't ya?
Screwball's challenges were fun in the base game, however I was particularly annoyed at having to get enough OMGs by hitting people in specific spotlight areas to wow the viewers. I got tired of her overly enthusiastic voice pretty fast too, and I didn't feel like her challenges were worth completing.
Oh, don't miss the photobomb!
Skipping to the end, I enjoyed the final battle and how it was an evolution of all the Sable gear put into one superpowered person. Honestly though, this DLC felt lackluster compared to the first one. It was shorter and more straightforward, and the only side mission available involved everyone's favorite character, Screwball. I was left disappointed because I don't believe this expansion was on par with the main campaign nor the first DLC. Moving on to the third and final expansion, Silver Lining, the vibes are a bit better. Of course, there are hammerhead thugs everywhere causing mayhem, but the sun is back out, photo mode is relevant again, and it just seems like everything is looking up ever so slightly. Hammerhead and his men keep hitting Sable locations to steal their technology, and this leads to the return of a character from the main campaign, Silver Sable herself. Of course, she doesn't quite mesh with Spider-Man at first, and there's some conflict there that has to be dealt with. She's a very serious person, whereas Spider-Man cracks jokes and constantly tries to ease the tension. It makes for a good combination, and I enjoyed their dialogue. Thankfully, MJ is back as Spider-Man's support unit after being absent in the second DLC. I think this is one of the best ways for the writers to keep developing the rekindled relationship between her and Peter without interrupting the flow of the story too much. These expansions aren't too long anyways, so having random meetups with MJ might make them feel out of place.
What do you think about taking a vacation when all this is over?
Vacation? I'm not sure I know what that word means.
Through the stolen technology, this DLC introduces a new enemy type who is powered up by Sable armor. It's an evolution of the boss battle from Turf Wars that gives the armor to normal brutes. They aren't too hard to fight and are easier to deal with than the previous DLCs and new enemy types. Hammerhead's men also take advantage of Sable's jetpacks with a new flying type of enemy. They fire airborne gadget deactivators, so you have to watch out where you're swinging. I actually enjoyed fighting these enemies, and it was really cool to jump from one to the other while in midair. Another thing I really wanted to begrudgingly mention is that once again, yes, Screwball is present in this DLC as a side mission. However, this time there are a couple other side missions that help extend the length of this expansion. The first was intertwined with the underground Hammerhead bases and involved a character named David. It was a feel-good story that I felt came at a proper time following the grim vibes of the Turf Wars storyline.
These men attacked me and stole most of the supplies. Where they took them, I do not know.
The other side mission involves another set of collectibles. This time they're audio recordings left at old crime scenes. What's so great about how most collectibles are done in this game is how they're intertwined with an interesting story. Some gaming companies just add collectibles as a chore, but Insomniac uses them to expand the game's world with side stories. This mission in particular leads to a story that continues something that was started in the Turf Wars expansion. Overall, I thought this DLC was decent and a step up from the previous one. The best part about each of these DLCs is that they expand upon existing side characters from the main game. The first one deals with Black Cat, while the next one deals with Fury, and this final one has Silver Sable return to the fold. My favorite was the Heist for sure, followed closely by Silver Lining, while Turf Wars sits lower in third place. I'm going to give the City That Never Sleeps expansions a 7 out of 10 overall. Have you played Spider-Man Remastered? What were your thoughts on the game? Let me know and I will see y'all next time.